Welcome to this webinar, and thanks for joining. I'm Romain Gauthier, co-founder and CEO of Didomi, and I'm very happy to host this webinar today. We'll wait for the last people to join us, and we'll get started. So the goal for this webinar is very simple. We would like you to understand what you should do about Google Consent Mode and these new requirements that came live this month. So by the end, we'd like you to walk away understanding what it is and also what are the impacts on your digital activity, especially with respect to Google solutions, Google Ads, Google Analytics. And before we get started, we'd like you to also realize that it's not very complex nor very technical, but it can have a significant impact on your data collection ability if not done right. So considering how overwhelming these sort of changes can be for you, we've assembled a great panel of experts to help you deep dive into this topic. And so today I'm very happy to be with Eunice, Tony, and Max. Eunice, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Eunice. I am the APAC Ads Privacy Product Lead, and specifically, I'll be representing Google in the context of sharing more about consent mode, which is going to be one of the core aspects we'll talk about today.
Thanks for joining, Eunice. And then we have Tony and Max from 55. Tony, do you want to introduce yourselves? You seem to be muted.
Hello, everyone.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Tony. I'm the executive director in 55, and also the head of China mainland office. Yeah, and I will introduce. Maybe some of the listeners may never have heard about us before, and I will introduce ourselves during the today's presentation later. Yeah.
Thank you, Tony, for joining. And then we also have Max from 55. Hello, Max.
Hello. So my name is Max. I'm an innovation expertise specialist here at 55 APAC. We work with great products such as Didomi and Google to help really accelerate businesses.
Thank you, Max. Okay, so before we dive right in, let me briefly introduce you to Didomi and our APAC partner 55. So Didomi is a privacy technology solution that will help you collect, store, and distribute consents for any geo that requires it to be compliant, like Europe with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that you may have heard of. So we call that Consent Management Platform, CMP, that's the acronym. And our role is to make your compliance easy by handling all the complexity of consent collection, starting from the targeting of the user in Europe to then presenting it with a compliant and friendly user experience on web, on mobile, on other platforms, and down to the integration with partners like Google through Google Consent Mode in real time, so that the consent signal that you collect can flow seamlessly across your digital marketing stack. That's our role as a company. And so we do understand that this sort of tech requires also expertise. And that's why we are partnering with 55, who will guide you on this probably new journey for you and help you set up and run your Didomi CMP, as well as provide a lot of expertise on these matters in terms of optimization and monitoring of these solutions. So we think the two of us can really deliver an end-to-end solution and help you navigate this change seamlessly. So that's the goal of this partnership. So the agenda today is also simple. We are going to introduce you to Google Content Mode with Eunice from Google, and detail Google's approach to consent collection and consent management platform. And then we'll move to a more practical aspect of implementation, and demoing also what it can look like, so that you can start imagining what it could be meaning for you as a company. During the presentation, we'll pause also to accommodate for questions. So it's intended to be an open session, and for you to bring your questions. We have a great panel of experts, so take advantage of that, and feel free to raise your questions in the questions tab, and we'll be happy to answer them. Okay, I'll leave the floor to Eunice, who will present us Google Consent Mode and Google's approach to it. Thank you, Eunice.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I also want to take a moment to recognize the fact that this is a topic that might not be so familiar in APAC. So I will kind of be a bit more going into context of things, just to help everybody kind of be on the same page, I guess, on why we're talking about this. So essentially, I think everybody is here to learn, but the very core audience on whom this would be very specifically applicable to, it's number one, it's if you're an advertiser who is advertising to an international audience, of which obviously the European region is part of this international audience. Number two, it's if your business is specifically targeting the European region. And number three, it's if you are planning, you're not doing it now, but you're planning to expand your business into the kind of European EEA. EEA is economic Europe economic area, into the European region to do that. So if you fall into any of these buckets of audiences, then this is extremely kind of applicable to you, I would say. And why do we talk so much about Europe and all that? And a lot of this is also stemming from a regulatory front, where they are really the center of a lot of regulatory action. Essentially one of the first understanding on consent-related regulation is actually the GDPR. It was launched in 2018, which has been a while now. But over the years, if you're kind of speaking to any user in the European region, it has become a really common thing for them to expect consent. And from average kind of EU user, that is something that they expect businesses to really respect as well. So that is the context, and the very newest regulatory release right now in the region is in the European region is actually the Digital Markets Act, short form for DMA. And this is a new law that has started enforcement in March. So what this means, it creates additional obligation in the context of user consent. So, just now I've mentioned that the GDPR is for businesses to make sure that they get user consent for users who go onto their site in terms of sharing their data, such as their cookie information, their kind of email addresses and whatsoever. On top of that, there is the new enforcement of this law called Digital Markets Act. The Digital Markets Act, it's specifically applicable to 6 gatekeepers. So if you look at the screen over there I've put put the different logo and alphabet of which Google falls under. It's one of the gatekeeper that the DMA has kind of enforced that we need to do. So what exactly do we need to do? We from Google, as one of the gatekeeper, would also need to ensure that user consent is given to advertisers and publishers before they are used for measurement and ads personalization. So if you like, it's a bit of a double kind of security in the form of user consent perspective. First of all, the GDPR makes sure that advertisers collect the right user consent, and the DMA makes sure that when you pass the consent to us, we are doubly sure that this is consented. So essentially, that's kind of what we are looking at from a DMA perspective, which is why Google Consent Mode is there to allow you to communicate those signals to us. So if you would like to read up more about it, we have the Google EU user consent policy. It has quite a bit of details to help you kind of understand the situation that's happening right now in the European region, just so that you can be familiar with it. There is also a pretty kind of common misunderstanding, and I'd like to kind of mention this as well. It's Google is actually the one asking for this change. That is actually not technically true. The change is required by law, where people are required to collect, where the law requires publishers and advertisers to collect user consent. And it's also by law that now Google needs you to properly communicate it to us. So this is really the context that's really driving all these changes that you're starting to see as we're talking about advertising into the EU region. So, okay, so now let's go into a bit more detail. I spoke about the need to kind of get consent and communicate it. So what exactly is required? There are kind of two very broad steps that's required. The first step is for businesses, advertisers in this context that we're speaking, to collect user consent. Like I said, this is not new. If you're operating in the European region and not doing that, you're already exposing yourself to regulatory risk. And actually, Google is not kind of super prescriptive in terms of how advertisers collect consent. This is for you and as an advertiser to discuss with the legal team to make an assessment of it. But the most common way, and also we recommend, is to implement a consent banner via a Google certified CMP, which is a consent management platform. Didomi is one of them. This is the most common way, and we recommend you to collect consent through the use of a consent banner. For people in this region where having a consent banner is not immediately clear on how you execute it or how you kind of develop it, using a CMP is the fastest and easiest way to do that. And they have a wealth of experience to kind of consult on this area as well, which is kind of why we strongly recommend that as the first step when you're exploring, getting user consent sort of infrastructure up in your website. Second of all, it's as part of the DMA, we need to make sure that the user consent is communicated to Google. There are multiple sub-actions that one can take, but consent mode, it's one of the main action. And essentially what it does, consent mode allow us to allow advertisers to automatically pass the consent signals to Google through the adjustments of tag behavior, or if you're looking at the app environment, SDK behavior as well. So the need to communicate consent is applicable for web as well as app. And that is why Didomi is here to also represent kind of both aspects from a web and app perspective. So as we move on to the next slide, I would also kind of like to stress what is the implication on not doing that, implication on not properly collecting and communicating consent to Google. So to ensure that, advertisers have continuity in terms of audience and measurement features. So from an audience capability standpoint, right? If advertisers do not do that, any tag-based remarketing efforts will no longer be applicable from March onward. So for instance, if you are highly dependent on kind of tag-based data to do any form of remarketing, and if you do not communicate all this, if you do not implement consent mode and communicate the consent to us via that, essentially any future remarketing efforts in the EEA will no longer be applicable. So that means that you will lose your data freshness, you will lose your scale, and it would also impact kind of activation audience performance as well. So that's from the audience activation bit. From a measurement perspective, we in Google will also start to ramp up audit and enforcement efforts to make sure that advertisers are properly communicating consent to us. And if not, based on these audits, when it is flagged by the audit that proper kind of communication is not done, the account will actually be suspended, and then you would no longer be able to continue to get conversion tracking in your measurement. So once again, this is specific into the EEA region that I'm talking about. And if you're advertising to the rest of the world, we're not like actively enforcing this, but specifically in the EEA audiences and your ability to continue to do sustainable measurement, it's going to be impacted. So just want to be very clear on the implication of it. So this might also be the first time we're hearing about consent mode. So let me just broadly mention what it is again. So first of all, passing consent signals to us, I've kind of mentioned that already. Essentially, when a user goes onto a site or go to an app, the consent banner would come out, of which they would then have the ability to accept or reject the communication of this signal to us. So another common misunderstanding is people might think that implementing a consent banner equals to implementing consent mode. That is not true. Essentially, there are two steps, as I've mentioned earlier. Step one, you need to implement the consent banner. And step two, you need to adjust the tag behavior for consent mode to be enabled. This is when the entire kind of steps are done. So there are some advertisers that have done step 1 but not step 2, of which then that results to it being an incomplete implementation. And you might ask, what is the apart from losing audience data and apart from having less measurement, one of the things that will be affected is also you would be losing signals as well. So imagine for people who, when you serve the banner, there will be people, regardless of how best we optimize, who will decide to reject sharing of data. This rejection of sharing of data would mean that we will no longer receive any of this data for any form of modeling or any form of performance optimization or any form of measurement. What consent mode does, it's based on these people who have rejected sharing consent signals, we will then also be able to model for this conversion, just so that you will continue to receive a pretty complete picture of your kind of measurement capabilities. And using this measurement signal is really important for us to use that to power kind of machine optimization. So those are some of the, on top of consent mode being a compliance tool for you to communicate consent to us, it is also a performance continuity optimization tool because we have modeling built into as part of consent mode, right? So that is a consent mode in a nutshell. Next, I would also share a bit more in terms of this evolution of consent mode. I mean, it has been around for a while, but of late, because of the Digital Markets Act, we need to essentially double down on the way we are getting permission to use user data for ads personalization and measurement, of which we've added. So within consent mode, if you're using consent mode in the past, there is number 1, which is ad storage, and number 2, which is opposite direction. Number 1, analytic storage, and number 2, ad storage. These are available in consent mode version 1. Right now, we are at consent mode version 2. Version 2 has these 2 new parameters, ad user data and ads personalization. The long and short of it is we need all this information to enable us to be compliant to DMA, to then allow us to continue to allow you to measure and to allow you to do personalization. So if this is very confusing, the takeaway here is just use the latest version and it would have all the 4 different parameters that's required. So that's that. Next, there are multiple ways to also implement consent mode. Essentially, you can do it manually through Google Tag, or you can kind of adjust your kind of SDK tag behavior, or through GTM, Google Tag Manager as well. These are custom implementation solutions that are actually quite time consuming and is not as efficient versus the usage of an integrated certified CMP. So the CMP, such as Didomi, has already integrated with consent mode. So there is the available templates and also kind of implementational support that is available at hand to help. And also with tech partners such as 55, they are really here to consult and also kind of work with you within APAC time zone and all to kind of help with the implementation. So that is the gist of consent mode. And just in case we have any questions before we get down to the more kind of technical elements of demo as well as understanding from 55, just wanted to put it out there in case there's any questions. I can also just do a quick Q&A right now.
Thank you, Eunice. I think the audience is warming up. So again, feel free to raise questions in the tab. We'll be happy to address them. If there are no questions, we can move to the second part of this webinar with Tony, who will first introduce us to 55, and then we'll demo with Max implementation of consent mode to make it very concrete for the audience. Tony, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, it's very honor to be invited by Didomi to today's session, and I'm representing 55 APAC region in today's webinar. Yeah, and 55 is a French data consulting company, and CMP is one of our key offers. And we have rich experience in the CMP firm and quite familiar with various CMP software, and have successfully implemented numerous cases before. Yeah, and in the past period, we have successfully implemented CMP products for several famous luxury group, cosmetic groups, and GTMC group as well. And we have summarized a very highly standardized process and documentation to assist our client in starting from scratch and completing all the deployments quickly. And 55 can also support on CMP's whole value chain from audit, deployment, governance, knowledge transfer, and optimization. Yeah. Speak of optimization, I'd like to remind everyone that successfully deploying of CMP and the activation of the COMO consent mode is just the first step. We needed to be compliant with GDPR and how to optimize our banner to make our users more likely to choose consent, thus minimize the impact on our data tracking as much as possible. Is a process that requires continuous attention and optimization in the long run. Yeah. And in terms of the product, after implemented several different CMPs on the market, frankly speaking, we think Didomi is an excellent and mature software, apart from providing the best features and performance, but also ensures a very competitive advantage in terms of pricing. Yeah, trust us. And therefore, if you visit 55's our official website, you will find that we are also using Didomi as our CMPs worldwide. And we are, in APAC region, we are very honored to be selected as a strategic partner by Didomi. And here we will collaborate closely with Didomi to provide our clients with a comprehensive range of services from product to implementation. Yeah, we have 5 offices in APAC region and 2 in China mainland, 2 in Taiwan, supports the local clients. And our Singapore office will handle the reseller and the services from entire Southeast Asia region. And also our Hong Kong offices, serving as our APAC headquarters, will cover the rest of Asia, including Australia and the Middle East. And our team supports over 10 different languages. If you have any requirements regarding on CMP and COMO, feel free to reach out to us at any time. We will assign a successful manager to you who speaks your most familiar language and support you with the time within the time zone, if possible. Yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you. Yeah.
Tony, and yes, the number one reason why we partner with 55 is because 55 consistently delivers this expertise on consent management to large global clients and also clients in the APAC region with dedicated support on the time zone. We've learned in Europe that it's also a critical aspect of consent management. There is the initial effort, which is to put that live, but there is also then the continuous monitoring effort where it becomes an optimization question. Why? Because consent will have an impact on your data tracking abilities, and as a result, it's not just a compliance requirement; it's a performance requirement. So since we started in 2017 at Didomi, we have invested in what we call consent analytics capabilities. And so what you can see here on the screen is an extract from our consent benchmark, which is a white paper that we publish yearly on consent rates. So what type of consent behaviors you can expect based on your vertical, your geo, your the type of audience you have, whether it's web or mobile, and we deep dive into these consent rate metrics so that you can have a pretty much a reference of where your performance should be and what is considered good in the space. And so we realized that after implementing a consent management platform, the next question is how good am I doing? And we will help you answer this question and find ways to optimize your consent rate. What you can see on the screen is that there is the consent rate, so the number of people who say yes versus the number of people who say no. But there is also a very important metric that we also illustrate here, which is the no choice rate. So people who do nothing or just leave the website because they see your banner or bounce, and that can have a significant impact on your performance as well. So we are there as a solution also to help you understand this sort of impact and run optimization to get better. Same sort of metrics for web, where we can see the same type of effect between the consent rate and the choice rate. Anyway, if you're interested, I advise you to download the consent benchmark and also to reach out to 55 or Didomi to have this discussion. We are also sharing here a bunch of tips that are actually like the most frequently asked questions with respect to your consent banner configuration. So what sort of format should I select? And here you can see what we typically observe in the market with obviously a dominance of the pop-up format because it's also driving the most choices. So you're kind of forcing choice, and as a result, minimizing the no choice rate, which are people who do nothing, and that can have a very significant impact, especially on page one. So the initial page view of your users. And then you can see that the footer is also very popular and can be a very valid choice depending on your industry and how sensitive you are in terms of performance to this first page and the first pages of your traffic. And then just sharing a couple of data points in like between these the format performances. When consent is optional, we see a no choice rate between 40 to 70%, meaning that before counting the number of people say yes, you have already lost between 40 and 70% of your data. When consent is required, you get down to a level that is like below 1/3 of your traffic, and that starts to be a bit better, especially with consent mode V2 activated, where provided you have the right setup, Google will also be able to model the portion of your traffic that you're not seeing because of consent, which is, I think, a very powerful capability that you should leverage. But the more consent you get, the better the modeling will be as it's feeding the modeling. That was like to briefly share a bunch of typical like optimization questions we see with our clients, and to also illustrate that it's not just a compliance question. It's very much part of your future day-to-day work as a digital marketing specialist to understand the impact of a consent rate. And we believe that with 55 we can guide you through this journey and make sure you get the optimal performance. Max will now present like a list of to-do. So if now you want to move forward and progress on your implementation, what should you be doing? Max, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Romain. So usually at this point, our audience would think, okay, I know I need a consent banner. I want to implement consent mode. I know Didomi is a great product that helps me get there. How do I get started? Step by step, even baby steps. So what we usually do is we share with our clients a list of to-dos. And today I'm sharing a sneak peek of it just to give you a taste of the things that you actually need to implement, to think about along the way. And you can see it's not really a very technical only problem. It's actually a multi-team effort. On the legal side, you'll need to understand your legal frameworks that apply to your region, especially your audiences based region. And you also need to stay up to date with the most common and most recent legal updates. So having understood the legal aspect of it, you will need to fit the legal understanding to your product and design, which means that you will need to design a banner that first compliant with the privacy policies, second, that's integrated deeply into your product so that your consent banner is not out of shape with your product. Your audience wouldn't think this is from another planet or universe. Right, you need to fit those into your product. And then we come to the tech aspect of it, which meaning that all your infrastructure has to be based as per your legal requirements. So as for GDPR, it requires your infrastructure stored and hosted within the EU region. Then having these infrastructure set up, you will need to identify users of their origins, record and manage a log of their consent choices and apply them. And then you'll need to use these user choices to properly initialize third-party SDKs, and then setting up consent mode to better help you collect some of the signals that are missing. So that seems to be a long and somewhat dreadful to-do list, right? And I'm skipping about the multi-team cooperations, communications. So is there a better way? And the answer is yes, there is. So what you can do is choose a CMP platform such as Didomi to help you better get started on a lot of different aspects. On the legal side, you have experts on Didomi side that have IAB TCF and other frameworks set up already within the product for you, and then it's also maintained and keep up to date. On the product and design side, you have a built-in banner designed by Didomi to be compliant as well as good looking. And then you have multiple initialization methods to help you fit a consent banner into your product and fully integrate it. And on the technical side, I'm a developer myself. I have to say Didomi's SDKs is just a breeze to use. And then it has infrastructure set up and hosted for you within the EU region. And you can leverage their versatile API with their robust SDKs. As for us, all you need to do is to get a head start with us. Is to contact us, and then you can learn from other companies' experience, big, small app and website, as well as different industries. And you can also identify strategies that best fit you and your product, and eventually leverage our expertise and best practices to get you started as soon as possible and roll this out as quickly as possible. So yeah, that's really a taste of what we do in terms of a Didomi 101 with our clients. And then following this, I have actually put together a demo iOS app to help you get a look and feel of what Didomi would actually look like in real scenario. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so my screen is visible, right? Just to make sure.
Yes, thank you, Max.
Okay, sure. So yeah, this is my demo iOS app. I'll go ahead and fire it up, and we get to see together how it looks like in terms of look and feel, as well as deeply integrated consent mode. So as for initialization, you can initialize, first time when the app opens. And this will be how a default template for a Didomi banner look like in an app. I could choose disagree and close, agree and close, or I can choose learn more. Say if I choose agree and close, you'll first see that our consent mode parameters are denied. This is set up by me as a default behavior. When I choose agree and close, you'll start to see that add storage, analytics storage, as well as the V2 parameters are all being granted. Within your app, you can also at different time spot show your users a list of vendors that you use. For me, I put AdMob, AppsFlyer, Google advertising products, GA, Meta Ads, all the very common SDKs that a lot of different app owners use. And then following that, we have a list of purposes that you can choose from. This is also just to give users more visibility of what they're choosing. You could also just show your users the purposes that you are currently leveraging, and they can choose to, just to disagree all, agree all, or maybe just choose some of them to agree. Say if I choose disagree, you'll instantly see that all the parameters are actually denied. And then you can also bind it to a little icon on the bottom left for whichever kind of setup suits you. And yeah, this would be a very easy demo of what a Didomi implementation in an iOS app look like. I hope this gives you a better idea of how it works and the look and the feel. Yeah, and that's about it for my part.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
Very interesting, to make it visible to everyone, and so everyone understands that all the work behind the scenes that a technology like Didomi will do for you, and also the benefit of having experts on your side to build this sort of experience and correct integrate with your Google solutions. So I think it's also time for this summary, the checklist to help you prepare your business. I think I don't remember who was supposed to run this one. I can go with it if you'd like, but three main things to summarize what we just said. So get familiar with Google Consent Mode V2, and it's shared a lot of interesting insights into the why and the how. Google has heavily documented Google Consent Mode V2, so we can also share a bunch of key links. I see that Eunice has also started to share some links in the chat as well. So second step is to make sure your CMP is Google certified. So if you select a CMP to help you on this journey, this is the critical thing to check, because it will guarantee your consent mode integration, and it's a guarantee that Google offers you that the CMP in question was audited and the integration was qualified as valid. Obviously, there is always the option to build it yourself, as Eunice pointed out. So it's more work, but it can have some merits in some situations. So if you're in doubt, I think you can have this discussion with 55 about the benefits and opportunity of building it yourself. Obviously, if you select a CMP, we'd be happy to be considered and present you our capabilities. And last but not least, as I said, being like with the right experts on your side is what we've seen a critical aspect of a successful transition and migration to consent mode. Also, think about consent mode as I think a first step in your privacy journey. So it's like aimed at Europe, specifically the EA region, but there are other regulations emerging. Privacy regulations are getting very popular in a number of regions around the world. And so I think it could be also an opportunity to examine your privacy stance with respect to all these regions, especially if you operate globally with traffic in every country. The benefit of selecting the right CMP partner is also to be in the position to present your users abroad with the right privacy experience, if that's required per law, or if you'd like to make that a part of your brand experience. So 55 is definitely the go-to company to help you on this journey and guide you with these like complex choices. Any questions that emerged? Yes, I think we have one. Can we just enable CMP, and will the CMP manage it, or should we make changes in GTM too? Great question. So you like first we are assuming here you're using Google Tag Management, and as a result, yes, you'll have to do a bit of work in your GTM configuration. As a CMP, we provide you with a template to make that very easy. And I'll share right away the documentation that you may want to look. It's actually here. The help center documentation for Didomi will show you how it would look like. But yes, you will be required to make some changes in your GTM configuration. To basically, your GTM tag will listen to the Didomi SDK and adapt its behavior depending on the signal that we sent to the GTM tag. Hopefully this answers your question. Maybe Eunice or Max or Tony, you want to add something here? If not, I think we have more questions in the question tab. Thank you, Sarah. I think Eunice answered them already. If there are no more questions, let me thank everyone for today's presence. Hopefully this was like insightful and answered your questions. If you have any thoughts, questions, or considerations, and you'd like to have a discussion about Google Consent Mode, please reach out to the 55 team on this email address, or just like require a demo on our website. We'd be happy to continue this conversation with you directly and examine your unique case to offer you the best possible solution. I'll end by also thanking Eunice for the opportunity to have you with us. Yes, Eunice?
Yeah, can I just add on one more thing, just so that we also help the kind of listeners in the call to also get started? I think the first thing you need to really do is a discovery exercise internally, just to understand in your advertising campaigns whether you are targeting any EEA or your Europe users. If you are not sure about how to do it, you can reach out to your Google account rep. They will have access to a specific dashboard which would tell them specifically whether within their advertising campaign whether you have any exposure in the EEA region. So that's one very immediate step to understand whether you've got exposure. And if the answer is yes, then all these different steps on contacting 55 to understand more, understanding more about Didomi will be a very relevant next step for you.
Eunice, that's a great point. Yes, that's the immediate, I think, action step. And yeah, we've been very happy to have you with us today. Thanks for listening. And again, if you have any questions or doubts, feel free to reach out. Have a great rest of the day wherever you are, and we'd be happy to hear from you in the future. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.